This is Under the Dome, and I'm Debbie Ingram, and I'm here with the leadership from the House Appropriations Committee today. So we have with us all the top people. We have the chair of the committee, Representative Scheu from Addison 1, which is mostly Middlebury. Yep. We have Representative Martha Feltus from Caledonia 3, who's the vice chair of Appropriations, and her district covers Linden, Wheelock, Sheffield, Sutton, and Newark. And then we have Representative Tiff Bluemle, who is from Chittenden 13, which is the south end of Burlington, and she's the ranking member of Appropriations. So, the one thing that you all have in common is that you're women, which is great. But you have there are a lot of distinctions. Otherwise, you represent varying degrees of urban or rural areas of Vermont. You're from different regions of Vermont. You're from different parties. So we're really that's the first thing I wanted to comment on, is that how happy we are that to see Vermont in action, working on something as important as the budget and having such great representation. Mm-hmm. So maybe if we have time, we'll get back to that a little bit. But let's dive into the really substantive work that you're doing on the budget. Now, last year's FY26 budget totaled $9.1 billion, and that was included a buy down for education and some tax breaks and some investments in housing and public safety. This year, Governor Scott has already proposed a $9.4 billion budget. And so how does the work you're doing in the House compare to the governor's budget?
Well, it might be easiest. Thank you for having us, by the way. This is very nice, and thanks for the introduction. To sort of step back and talk a little bit about the budget process. So the Emergency Board, which consists of the four money chairs, House and Senate Appropriations, Senate Finance, and House Ways and Means, and the governor make up the Emergency Board. And twice a year, we get what's called a consensus revenue forecast that the two economists, one for the governor and one for the legislature, agree on, and then we vote to accept it. And that's what we use for our revenue base. So we've all agreed on the amount of revenue based on that. So we don't fight about that.
That's good. It's good to start from a common point.
So it's really important. Not every state does this, as I've learned as I've gone to national conferences. It's quite astonishing, actually, how other states do this. So I'm grateful that we do it this way. So we start from there. The governor proposes a budget and basically uses all the money available and sends it to us, and then we take it, and then we start looking at what they've done, and we hear from all the agencies and departments in the administration and other statewide offices like the Treasurer's Office and the Attorney General and state's attorneys and all those kinds of things. So we have two public hearings where nonprofit organizations, other organizations, and individuals can come and tell us what they would like to see in the budget. And we also have a legislator hearing, so legislators can come and tell us what's important to them. So we have all that information from everywhere. And the governor's budget has things that we generally agree we need to keep, like staff, salaries, the cost of renting money, what we do, renting space rather, and what we need to do to keep the lights on. And we may or may not want to keep certain programs. Sometimes the governor proposes eliminating programs. Sometimes we say, well, maybe not, or whatever. So we end up with all of that information, and then our job is to put together a budget within the revenue that there is. And usually a huge percentage of the budget is spoken for. It's just, we don't need like pension money, benefits, all those things are there. So we actually, of the $9.4 billion or whatever you said it was, which includes a lot of federal money as well as transportation funds, we only get to play with a very little bit of money at the end of the day, right? I mean, is there other things you'd add to that?
I mean, we have a rainy day fund that has to be funded every year. There are automatic payments that we make as a percentage of income, and that is what that's just off limits. So our flexibility, and especially this year, is very limited.
Right. Yeah.
I think the comment regarding the rainy day fund is interesting because many people think that we are just literally spending all the money that's there. We account for all the revenue that's come in, and we account for where it's going to go, but a good bit of it does go into reserve funds. It's not like we're literally spending every dollar out on the street. We are putting money away at the same time that we are also spending money in programs.
So a fun fact is that we are the only state in the nation that does not have a constitutional requirement to balance our budget. And yet we balance our budget every year. Because we try as much as we can to be very fiscally responsible. And that's the first thing you can do is balance your budget and fill up all your reserves so that you know that you have those monies in the event of other issues. So that's kind of where we start. In the last couple of years, we have been creating a spreadsheet of all the requests that we get that aren't in the budget currently. And last year we had close to $300 million in asks above what was in the budget. This year we have $250 million in asks. So it didn't go down very much. No. Despite my saying this is a very different year, we don't really have a lot of extra money. So what our committee is, where we are in the process now, we have to vote a budget out by straw poll next Friday, the 20th of March. We'll have a final vote on the 23rd. So we have a week. We finally are getting all the information. Bills are coming from other committees, and now they often have money, and so we have to account for those as well. The assignment that the committee members are working on now is, let's say we have $15 million of money we can play with. How would you spend the first $5 million? How would you spend the second $5 million? And how would you spend the third $5 million? So it's a way of prioritizing what they are. So everybody has the spreadsheets of all of the requests, and they're working on what are their first $5 million in priorities, the second and the third, and we'll be going over those next week.
Great. Okay. Well, I do want to make sure we talk about something that's uppermost in many Vermonters' minds, which is the education spending. And Governor Scott came out, early on saying that he wanted again to preserve so when we say buy down our property taxes, that really is talking about a transfer from the general fund into the education fund. Is that right? And so Governor Scott mentioned the figure of $75 million to begin with, and then I've heard amounts as much as $115 million. Is this something that is receiving a lot of discussion in the House Appropriations Committee?
You keep looking at me.
I want to give you two a chance to speak. I don't need to be the only one talking.
Oh, no,
It will have some discussion, that's for sure, I think. A lot of that, at least in my particular area, the school board went to the community and said, well, the governor says he's going to put in $75 million. And so they based their calculations on taxing in that particular area. And I think a lot of other communities did.
Yes, they did.
The real question I have, personal perspective, is that, gee, it's nice to keep the tax rate down as low as we possibly can. But buying down that 75 just makes a bigger problem next year because we have to make it up. And so then you end up on a cliff and the tax rate is that much more. And we will have less. Right. So that's where Ways and Means has to think about this in terms of the yield bill, and then, kind of indicate to us what their suggestion is regarding doing that.
And I've heard some people talk about the possibility of spreading that tax relief over several years with the purpose of stabilizing the rise in property taxes. I'd be interested to know what kind of difference does that make, for individual household.
Right. And so there was about 75, we're rounding a little bit here, but 75 million in carry forward from last year, because last fiscal year we had more revenue than we expected. And so we saved that and reserved that. And then we also reserved $30 million that could be used for federal funds issues, housing issues, education, or other things to benefit Vermonters. It was a kind of a broad catch-all. So the governor is proposing taking the 75 million plus that 30 million, so you get 105 million. His proposal is to spend it all next year. And as I think Marty said, you spend it all next year, then what happens the year after? We don't have that. We're not going to have carry forward money this year. Revenues are coming in at or below what our projections are. So there isn't going to be, and given what's happening globally, I don't see that we're going to have a big carry forward. So what's fiscally responsible? That's how I keep coming back to. And is it more responsible to buy down taxes if that's what we're going to use it for over a longer period of time? Or do we want to create a cliff and then suddenly next year, where are we going to find $105 million when we don't have it? I mean,
Well,
right?
Because not only will we not have carry forward for this year, we also we will owe the federal government more in terms of Medicaid match, state match, and that will, I mean, to a significant degree, and making that match is going to be a big challenge for us.
Right. There's many other pressures on the budget,
Yeah.
not just that. And so, and the governor has said he wants to do this, but he wants to have an education plan, or he will not pass the budget. He'll veto the budget. So.
So
There's a lot of moving parts right now,
right.
of which we are focusing on the budget part.
Okay, right. So you talked about you could all pretty much agree on on the revenue. So I know Vermont depends a great deal on federal funding. I mean, you also mentioned that when we talk about our revenue. So how has that changed? We know there's a lot of things going on in the world. There was there's the big beautiful bill, and then there's the all the war going on in Iran, and how has that factored into your thinking?
Well, yeah, one of the things we did last year, because we did have a bunch of extra money, we set aside $50 million at the end of last year's budget that we transferred to the Agency of Administration, but it was for the emergency board to be able to use it to offset federal fund impacts, not backfilling everything. We have $3.1 billion in federal funds. We can't backfill that ever. But for example, we used $6.5 million of it last year when the federal government shut down and they stopped the SNAP benefits. And we felt that people ought to be able to eat. So we funded 15 days of those benefits to people, and that was about $6.5 million that we knew we weren't going to get back, or we assumed we wouldn't get back, but that came out of that $50 million. So we have that. We have another $30 million for federal funds that's the General Assembly can appropriate related to federal money. So we have some things there that we can.
And of course, everybody would like to use it.
Right. Yes,
So
there is that.
we have, it's a really sobering process. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody on the committee who served during a time when we had to make significant cuts.
2009, 8, 9.
Yeah.
I believe so.
And so things have been certainly tighter prior to the pandemic, but it forces us to make choices that we're not used to having to make and dig more deeply into existing state budgets.
Right.
I think it's important to note that this particular year, we haven't seen that much of a decrease in federal funds from what we had before. Certainly some, but not a huge decrease. But we do foresee that in future years, there are a couple of programs in particular that we know will be having lesser federal funds. So we need to keep that in mind. This particular year, it hasn't been that much of a difference. We've had to backfill a few things as it's been mentioned, but it's the next year and the year after in which we do foresee there will be fewer federal funds. And typically our budget has been reliant on 1/3 has been federal funding.
Funds, right.
And we need to be careful about that.
Right. Tell us about some of the top priorities. Housing has been a big problem in Vermont. Public safety continues to be on the forefront of a lot of Vermonters' minds. What are some of you mentioned you don't have a lot of wiggle room, but are there certain things that you're particularly prioritizing, trying to find funds for?
I think of the 3 H's: housing, healthcare, and what was the
And
third
human
one?
services.
Human services.
Right.
Those are where we all know healthcare costs have just skyrocketed over the last few years. And last year, the legislature developed and passed legislation to help reduce some prescription drug costs within hospitals, and a couple of other things, and started us on a path towards what's called reference-based pricing, which may help bring down healthcare costs. This year, the treasurer is proposing a prescription drug program that could, lower, depending upon the kind of prescriptions you happen to have, lower your costs by $200 a month for an individual. So there's some things we can do. Healthcare is a national issue, and we can nibble around at the edges, but we're trying to do what we can there. We have some various kinds of housing bills, which we have. We've spent well over $1.5 billion on housing in the last few years. Well over, maybe more than $2 billion. Housing takes time to build. Just because we pass a bill doesn't mean that there's instant houses, and I think people forget that at times. Last year we passed a bill that had this CHIP program, which was a community investment program for small communities to be able to get sewer and infrastructure to build a few houses here and there. And, in theory, you could build $2 billion worth of houses. Now, that's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen right away, but the capacity is there if everybody, and that's just getting started. So it'll be a few years before we see that. So we have various housing programs that we're working on. And the human services part is...
I think we're going to be having to decide what holes do we fill and what can we not. And it helps that we have received this large federal grant for rural health transformation, which will be able to fund things that we're not currently doing but really need to do as they relate to systems reform. But there are things that can't fund that are facing, precipitous drops in funding because the governor needed to make the budget work and made the choices that he did. But it does feel sometimes like, we're just sticking fingers in dike, and how you choose among. What I will say about the choices that we have is that somebody said, well, how many of the choices are like really aspirational? And I have to say that almost none of them are aspirational. They're really they're grounded in need. And I think that's what's very sobering to many of us on the committee, and why we're laboring over the assignment that our chair gave us to group our choices into $5 million increments based on, in anticipation of having, some amount of money to work with.
Right. We need to make sure that our economy is growing as well. And so certainly there's some emphasis on economic development, on workforce development to get the right workforce out there in the right areas where we need services, so that the population will continue to contribute. The population will contribute to the economy in terms of the taxes that we already have that will help support the government in the future. Yeah. But we need to make sure that that's a strong environment as well.
Right. So we have programs to. We have apprenticeship programs. We have a lot of healthcare related, whether they're forgivable loans or other last dollar in. We have more grants to students to go get an education for the first time. And they've been wildly popular.
Yes, yeah. Great.
So
well, good.
Nice to see that.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's another player in the process that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is the Senate, the other chamber.
Yes.
So I wanted to give you a chance to speak to, in years past, I think last year was maybe there were a few little problems here and there in working, and that can always happen when you have two separate bodies, right? Right. So how do you foresee the negotiations with the Senate this year?
Senator Perchlik came in as chair of Senate Approps last year, as I came in as chair of House Approps. So we had two new appropriations chairs, and we met before the session started and just sort of got to know each other a little bit better. We knew each other from being on the committee of conference in our previous roles, but not as like now we're in charge kind of thing. And we get along really well. And unlike what I hear things happening in other committees, we don't play games with one another. We, if I've got an issue with something, I'll go tell him what I really would like, and he does the same thing. So there isn't this funny second agenda sort of thing going on. We're both really pretty open and transparent with each other about, what can work and what can't work. And even if we don't agree, at least we understand where each other's coming from. So from that perspective, I feel like that's going really well. He tells a story of when he got into that position. He said, somebody told me I should make sure to take something off that Chair Scheu really likes, so that we can have a negotiation, like a tool, a chip to
To
and
bargain.
he said, I don't do that. I don't do that either. I mean, so I feel like we're in a different era that way. And yes, we always have our challenges with the Senate. I'm sure the Senate has their challenges with the House and, sausage making, right, for legislation. But I feel like we have really often tried to work together, and that even though we just finished the budget adjustment and there weren't that many differences. We had 3 meetings and the third one was to sign. I mean, it was very quick because we really talked a lot about things and we were more in agreement than not. So there may be battles between other committees, and I expect there will be, speaking of education. But I think on the appropriations side, we generally are able to iron out our differences quite amicably.
I think we both sides have a good view of what the public needs and what the various resources are, and you may disagree on we need more emphasis here or over there, but I think we both have a good grounding on what the total ought to be and how we need to equitably spread it around for everybody.
Right. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and I mentioned at the beginning that you folks yourselves are disparate. That you represent urban and rural places to different degrees. That you're different parties. Can you talk a little bit about how that's been? How do you feel that contributes to really supporting Vermonters and really making sure Vermonters get their needs met?
So I used to do a lot of nonprofit work and nonprofit consulting to boards, and I would talk about diversity of thought. And I think that's a really important thing we have. And that's what we have on our committee. And people are represent all across the state, and we all have our own experiences, and we need that diversity. It's messier. If we all thought the same way, we don't need one of us, right? But we don't. And so we talk about things, and we're a committee where we like each other and we enjoy each other's company. And even if we don't always agree, we still like each other. So that helps.
Well, and I'll just say, and I'm not buttering you up, but I mean, I think Chair Scheu has been very good at engaging all of us in participating. She doesn't just present, okay, here are 30 options, you pick your, top 10.
Right.
We're all engaged in sorting through the Michigas and trying to figure stuff out. And she makes the decisions she needs to make, but I think everybody is very engaged. And one of the things that I was thinking about the other day is I was looking around at our table, and we had been having a conversation about how we were going to approach the budget. Right. And I felt like every single person around the table just wanted to do the right thing. We're not trying to, exert power in some way, play games. I mean, we're just trying to figure it out together. Right. And I so appreciate that. It's a very healthy culture.
Yeah. So everybody's involved.
Right. I was just going to emphasize that. I'm from a rural area. Tiff is from the metropolitan area, and so the needs are very different. But I learn a lot about, what the needs in her area, and she learns a lot about ours as well. And we have that mix on the committee. And, Robin here is kind of in the middle, in Middlebury.
Right.
But in terms of your community, it's kind of, in between. Right. And so we all, I will certainly support many of the things that are of help to the metropolitan area, and I presume others will support things that are of help to the rural areas as well.
Because we're here for all of Vermont.
Yeah.
And you have to have that view when you're on appropriations. You can't just be about your town.
Right.
And I don't think anybody as a legislator should be here just about their town. You represent those viewpoints, which is really important. But at the end of the day, we're all one Vermont.
So not that big.
Well said, and I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and thank you for the hard work that you do. So this has been Under the Dome, speaking with the top 3 leaders of House Appropriations. I'm Debbie Ingram, and we're glad that you tuned in.